Meron po tayong informal talk and chat with the Scaparati community about the Philippine economy, digitalization, and MSMEs. Ang magsasabi po sa atin ng mga tungkol dito sa mga binanggit ko ay isang preeminent economist, professor at Harvard University, and the Instituto Estudios Superiores de la Empresa, or IESE, and a member of the 1986 Constitutional Commission and a patriot. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all give a warm welcome to Dr. Bernie Villegas.
Maraming salamat, Josie. Magandang umaga sa lahat ng mga nanay at mga kapaigan ng mga nanay, and happy anniversary. Alam niyo, ngayon, malaki ang crisis, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, pero all over the world. Ang taas ng inflation, ang presyo ng mga fuel, food are at high levels. But one thing I know about nanays, whenever you face crises, you always find opportunities. And that is the characteristic that I admire in especially small entrepreneurs who constitute 99% of Philippine business. Now, ano mga problema na ating dapat talakayin? Number one, ang taas-taas ng mga presyo ngayon. Siguro yung inflation natin will, even by the end of the year, still be between 5 to 6%. Bumababa ng kaunti, gawa na yung ating central bank is being more aggressive in following the example of the US federal system of increasing interest rates to be able to tame inflation. And ang ating central bank is very, very skillful in what is known as inflation targeting. So I don't fear na tataas beyond 6% yung ating inflation this year. And by next year, I see, because of the aggressive policy of the central bank, now led by Governor Filipidelia, by next year, we can see inflation moderating to 4 to 4.5%. Hindi pa at the level that the central bank wants it to be at 3 to 4%, but definitely we will not have the inflation rates that you see in the US, 8, 9, 10%, and in Europe. Gawa ng one of the best central banking systems in the world, believe it or not, is the Philippine central banking system. Probably it's not well known to our nanays because you have not been following probably in the past ang ginagawa ng ating mga central bank governors. But our central bank governors have been rated as the best in the world for many years. In fact, when Ben Diokno was central bank governor last year, he was rated by a world institution as the best governor in the world. Kaya we don't have to worry too much about our inflation getting worse. Now, another problem that some people see is yung nangyayari sa ating peso. Nagde-depreciate. For the first time in our history, it reached 57 and beyond. Now, that's exactly an example of a crisis that can be transformed into an opportunity. Yung mataas na exchange rate, 57, is of course a problem for importers. Pero those of you who are selling consumer goods should celebrate that now the families of 10 million overseas workers, that's a huge market, are now receiving 56 to 57 pesos for every dollar that the relative earns abroad. And that's a lot of purchasing power. So the first opportunity you should look for is to target the relatives of overseas workers with all of your attractive products or services that you are selling. So that's my first advice. I'm sure you can look at any neighborhood and you will always find relatives who receive a total of $36 billion of remittances. And you know that these relatives are spread out all over the Philippines. Some of them are concentrated, obviously. For example, yung mga seafarers, the majority of their relatives are in Iloilo. And I'm sure some of you are even part of that market. Now, another market you should target are those 1.4 million workers, yung tinatawag nating BPO IT enterprises. And ang nangyayari ngayon, they're no longer just concentrating in Metro Manila. More and more of these BPO IT businesses are attracted to Iloilo, to Puerto Princesa, to even Lawag. In fact, Lawag, Ilocos Norte is positioning itself for a very attractive portion of BPO IT, which is data centers. So you have to be very aware, especially because we're talking about digitalization, that part of our economy is going to literally explode. Among other reasons, because we see our telecom industry now more and more competitive. Hindi na lang PLDT and Globe, you already have Converge, you have Dito, and now, because I want you to realize what happened when the Duterte administration amended the so-called Public Service Act. Now, foreigners all over the world can come here and invest, even if they want 100% in a telecom company, in a railway, in an airport, in a seaport. That is the good news. And we are observing how our president is doing a very good job. He just got $7 billion worth of infrastructure investment committed by the Indonesians. Now he is in Singapore, and Singapore is much richer than Indonesia. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of his stay in Singapore, he will also get even more than $7 billion of investment, especially in airports, in seaports, in railways, in all of these build programs na hindi na pwede that our government will invest in. Why? Because our government is baon na baon sa utang. The government, even if it likes to, will not be able to continue the build program at the same rate as the Duterte administration. And I think we should definitely tell the government, don't spend too much anymore, because what you have to do is pay your debt. Now, what will take the place of the government? As I said, foreigners from all over the world, not only Indonesians, Singaporeans, Koreans, Japanese, Spaniards, they are all looking at the Philippine economy as very attractive. You know why? Because we have a young, growing, and in the case of BPO IT, English-speaking population. That's our number one asset. And it's also your number one asset because you are selling. And when you have a young population, the market grows much faster than a population in which 30% of the people are above 65 years old. I always say that when most of the people are above 65 years old, the only markets that grow very fast are false teeth, peluca, wigs, all these things that you sell to old people. But when young people predominate, your products are very sellable. So don't worry too much about this short-term problem of high inflation and consider the depreciation of the peso as an opportunity. Now, will this 56 to 57 continue for the rest of the year? Yes, it will not go beyond 57 anymore because of the central bank aggressive increase in the interest rate. They will be able to tame that depreciation. The same thing with inflation. But still, mataas yung 56 to 57, mataas yung inflation of 5 to 6, at least compared to what prevailed during the Duterte administration. But there's nothing we can do. It's a problem all over the world. So let's not over complain. And as I said, convert the crisis into an opportunity, which I think the nanays are very good in doing. You nanays have faced so many problems in the past. You were never discouraged. You always found ways of overcoming a crisis. Now, anong mga businesses will do better because of our 6 to 7% growth in GDP? Incidentally, and I'm not the one saying it, it's World Bank and many other outside institutions who are saying that this year and in the years coming, the Philippines will be one of the fastest growing economies in Indo-Pacific. In fact, this year, we will be the fastest in Southeast Asia, growing at 6 to 7%. Our only competitor is Vietnam. All the other Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, Singapore, they will grow at less than 6 to 7%. And this we can continue for all the years of the Marcos administration, because as I said, he is doing the right thing and he is surrounded by very good managers in his cabinet. So I'm being objective. I have seen all the administrations over the last 30 to 35 years, at least since the time of Cory Aquino. I must say, objectively, that this cabinet, as regards the economy, is the best ever I have seen. So you can be sure they will address the problems that we are facing. Now, anong mga negosyo will do better than others? Well, the first thing, this is what we call a no-brainer. You don't have to be an economist to know what it is. Anything related to food and agribusiness. And let me remind you that agribusiness is not just farming. Yun ang pagkakamali ng maraming young people when you say, do you want to go into agriculture? Just never. Agriculture, that's very poor. You know, you never make money. But agribusiness is not only farming, it's storage, cold storage, logistics, transport, processing. You know, San Miguel is agribusiness. Century Can is agribusiness. This is the area that I hope the nanays will look at very closely. Anything that from not only farming, although I will not discourage people from going into farming, especially high-value farming, vegetables like red lady papaya, all those things that you are taught by companies like Harvest, like East West Center. If some of you have a green thumb, please go into small-scale, high-value gardening, because there's going to be a tremendous demand, and you don't have to be far away in the countryside. You can have a small plot in Cavite, in Batangas, in Laguna, and grow these high-value crops, and your market is almost your neighborhood. And I'm sure some of you are already engaged in that kind of business, high-value gardening. You know, we call them plantitos and plantitas, but treat such gardening as a business and more than as a hobby. Then the other area that I'm sure many of you are involved in is anything related to health, whether curative and especially preventive. In fact, agribusiness and preventive medicine can intertwine because a lot of the crops you may want to grow are crops to make people healthy, vegetables and herbs that people are very interested in consuming to strengthen their health. So I'm sure some of you nanais are in that business. Then obviously anything related to transporting these goods from your home to the market. So whether you're going into something like Grab in a small way, joining what is known as a supply chain. So look at opportunities to serve the food industry with transport facilities. Then I'm sure you have noticed that there is already revenge traveling. Tourism is now doing very well, but not foreigners. There are now 60 million of us recovering our habit of going to places outside our home. I've been to a few areas like Baguio, Cebu. It's amazing. It doesn't seem that there was a pandemic. People are already all over the place. So anything that you can do to serve the domestic tourism market is going to be profitable. Then, obviously, some of you are involved in real estate. What will not move very fast would be very expensive units, 10 million or more. Those are going to recover probably 2 to 3 years from now. But what continues to be very sellable would be units that are priced between 1 million to 5 million. And who are the consumers, the market? Again, those 10 million or more overseas workers. They have all the purchasing power to be able to buy units between 1 to 5 million. And also those employees, anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5 million of BPO IT enterprises. They are still doing very well despite yung kanilang debate with the government. The government wants them to already go back to the office. The majority of them still want to stay at home. I'm sure that debate will be resolved one way or the other. But the fact is that industry expects to grow by 10% this year. And that means $26 billion worth that they will be earning. Again, multiply that by 56. That's a huge consumer market. So as you can see, and probably I can give you more information during the question and answer period, this crisis is bringing with it a lot of opportunities. So we are not going to be like those who always see the glass as half empty when we know full well that the glass is half filled. So let me end here, and I'm sure there will be questions. Let's maximize the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bernie. And now we will have an open forum. And the moderator is a former Undersecretary of Tourism, Ms. Alma Jimenez, who is now an entrepreneur, a passionate supporter of MSMEs, and a strong supporter of Scaparate.com. Ms. Alma, you may now lead the open forum. For questions, please write it down in the chat box. Thank you.
So Alma, I'm very glad that you're moderating, so you can talk also about tourism, your expertise.
Teka muna.
Yeah.
I will just share a little some thoughts and takeaways so that we could jumpstart the conversation, Doc Bernie. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Joey. Sandali lang ha. Okay, I hope you can see my slides now.
None yet, Miss Alma. Okay, that's there.
Sige, tinanggal ko lang baka mamaya mahirap yung ating connectivity. But can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it. Oh,
Okay,
very
thank
nice
you.
products.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. I put it on slideshow. Again, maraming salamat President Josie for the kind introduction. Magandang umaga po sa lahat ng naririto ngayon at nagpaunlak sa napakagandang paanyaya ng ating founding chair na si Joey Bermudez na tayo mag-uusap-usap tungkol sa mga bagay na makakatulong sa ating mga pangkabuhayan. Siguro marami na kayong gustong itanong kay Doc Bernie na nagbigay ng maraming pwede nating pag-isipan para makatulong sa ating mga layunin. So habang inaayos nyo, kaya sinusulat nyo sa chat box ang inyong mga tanong, sasabihin ko lang ito, walang kupas si Dr. Bernie. Simula nung naririnig ko siya, laging optimistic ako every time I hear him talk about the economy. May konti lang pag-amin, sabi ko kay Joey, nung in-invite niya ako mag-moderate, sabi ko, naku, para naman kakabahan naman ako dyan, Joey, baka maubos yung alam ko tungkol sa ekonomiya. Pero alam nyo, mahirap tanggihan si Joey, kaya tulungan nyo na lang ako. Yung mga questions nyo, yun ang makakatulong sa akin para magkaroon tayo ng aktibong partisipasyon sa pag-uusap natin ngayong umaga. Dr. Villegas shared many information with us at bilang senior citizen, medyo may konting challenge and senior moments. Kaya hayaan yung bigyan ko kayo ng konting paalala sa mga magagandang puntos na narinig ko at naisulat sa kanyang mga insights. First, ang sabi sa atin ni Dr. Bernie, merong inflation, oo, pero hindi ito katulad ng inflation ng mga ibang bansa dahil napakaganda ng management ng ating central bank. At sinasabi rin niya na yung depreciation ng ating peso, dalawang bagay yung pwede natin tignan. Para sa mga importers, medyo mahirap ito. Pero para sa ating mga nandito at saka nagbe-benefit from the what we call this, remittances of our OFWs, mas malaki ang purchasing power. So, marami tayong market na pwedeng matarget sa ating mga pamilya dito na nakikinabang sa mga remittances ng kanilang mga nagtatrabaho sa abroad. And also that the BPOs nagre-relocate na sa mga provinces. Sila yung nag-avail yata sa balik probinsya. And that will disperse economic benefits na hindi na masyadong concentrated sa NCR. So anong ibig sabihin nitong sinabi sa atin ni Doc Bernie? Ang marketing program natin should target these segments. Mag-isip tayo ng pwede natin gawin para ma-attract natin ang pera na dumarating dito sa mga segments na to. Ang pangalawang nasabi sa atin ni Dr. Bernie, anong business ang magpo-flourish ngayon, O, syempre, parati ang food and agribusiness kasi mahilig talaga tayong kumain. In fact, nakita ko ang paglaki ng MSMEs, especially in the food delivery business nung panahon ng pandemic. Dahil sa tingin ko, yun ngang mga maliliit ang sumagip sa mga tao na nakakulong sa lockdowns. And we found our sari-sari stores again. We found all of those we started to trust all those home-based services kasi wala tayong choice. Pero ang maganda nun, nandun na siya sa ating mga, what we call this, kaugalian, na-ingrain na sa atin ang habit na sumubok. So, napakalaking potential ng food, sabi ni Doc Bernie, at saka ng agribusiness, which means also the value chain. And healthcare, curative and preventive, o yung tinatawag nating wellness, will become a big market also. So is transporting business of goods from source to markets. And finally, dun sa malapit sa akin na industriya ay ang turismo. At sabi nga niya, revenge tourism. Gustong-gusto natin mag-travel. So, pumapasok tayo ngayon sa ating mga probinsya para matulungang umangat ang turismo. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, marami tayong opportunities for expansion for business or as markets. So sa tingin ko, nakuha ko naman siguro, Dr. Bernie, ang
Yes.
essence ng
Very well,
nagno-notes
very
kasi
well.
ako,
Thank you.
nagno-notes kasi ako nung nagte-take ka, di-discuss ka. So ngayon, na tayo, question and answer na tayo. We will take questions from our audience and you can use the chat box for this. Meron tayo dyan, so babasahin ko yung kung meron na kayong mga tanong dito. At isulat lamang ninyo dyan para kung may oras tayo at sana masasagot lahat ni Dr. Villegas ang iyong questions niyo. Titignan ko muna ito at nakalagay naman dito is merong tanong si Sige Felongco, Doc Bernie, can you expound further on how we can work smarter on the dollar-peso exchange rate? This seems to be a prevailing problem among the common folk that they end up despairing and thinking the economy is sinking. O yan, paano daw natin ito mapapakinabangan in more concrete terms, Dr. Bernie?
Well, to further elaborate, gawa ng ang mga imports will be more expensive. You will find opportunities to replace some of those products with your own local production. So more and more, it will be very expensive to buy chocolates from Switzerland. So why don't you expand all those beautiful products from Davao? It's amazing. In fact, they already are penetrating the international market.
Malagos,
So look,
tsaka yung
yes, and there's so many other imports that we are still having that can be replaced by domestic consumption and production. And that will happen the more imports become expensive. And let me also add that since capital will be a lot more expensive than labor, be very sparing in your use of equipment. In fact, make all equipment last as long as possible. And you will also benefit this country by making your processors more labor intensive. The more people you can involve in whatever you're doing with our hands, the better it is for the economy. So think, capital will be expensive for some time to come because the banks are now increasing their interest rates. I'm sure those of you who are borrowing know that the banks are no longer as happy to give you 6 to 7%. Now, siguro 8 to 10% ang mga binabayad ninyo. That means that you have opportunities now to depend more and more on hands rather than equipment. So that's my advice.
At siguro maidadagdag ko lang na sa kahirapan, di ba, Dr. Bernie, ng ating broken supply chain ngayon sa global, wala din namang, marami tayong oportunidad na i-offer ang ating local products kasi wala namang makadeliver kahit na gustong may mag-import. Dahil nga, nagkakaroon ng malaking problema ang ating supply chain. So sa tingin ko, pwede din natin i-take advantage yung mga ganyang klaseng mga, minsan kasi, di ba, may kasabihan tayo, yung minsan yung kahirapan ng ibang sektor ay kaluwagan naman ng mga iba. So nababalanse. So ito yung panahon na pwede siguro nating i-introduce din ang mga produkto natin as an alternative dahil hindi naman makapag-import ang mga importers and mahirap mag-consume goods.
That's Alma is right. Not only will they become more expensive, they will be more difficult to bring into this country because of the problem of international transport. No?
So sa tingin ko, mananalo dito ang mga micro and small enterprises. So ihanda rin natin ang ating So that means malaki din ang trabaho natin para mag-upgrade ng ating quality. Dahil syempre kahit papaano, hindi naman porket walang choice ang mga Pilipino kundi bumili sa lokal, mapakita lang natin sa pagsubok nila na magaling din naman ang produkto natin. Kanya kahit na dumating ng imports, hindi na sila pupunta sa imports na yun. Bakit pa? Mas magaling naman ang produktong Pilipino. So siguro yan ang pwede natin gawin dito. May tanong po from December Villanueva, Dr. Bernie. Ang gusto ko pong nagbebenta pala siya ng products from Iloilo, Panaderia de Mall at products from Calibo at Aklan, yung mga longganisa. It's very good. Ang gusto ko pong tanungin ay ano sa inyong palagay ang pwedeng magawa ng gobyerno para sa maliliit na negosyanteng katulad nila sa maikling panahon? Ano ang pwedeng gawin ng government?
Well, when it comes to mga langgunisa, I think the government has to be more proactive in addressing the swine fever that has decimated the stock of hogs. Here is where the private sector is limited in what it can do in regulating, for example, the hog industry and so on and so forth. So that's where we have to be very demanding of our government in the way they address this national crisis. No, as you know very well, pork products are expensive. In fact, we have to import a lot of them because of the African swine fever that hit us. So that's definitely the role of the government. And probably there's also where you can look for substitutes. I don't know whether more and more of you are producing langgonisa from other types of meat. Chicken langgonisa, even rabbit langgonisa, etc., etc. I think that's where some of you very enterprising nanais can take a look at how we replace traditional products with others that use materials that are in scarce supply.
Oo.
I'm sure you know better than I. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dr. Bernie. We also got questions, advanced questions from our participants, because we asked them to send their questions in advance. So isa sa mga sabi nila is concerns about connectivity. Kasi nga naman, nandito na tayo ngayon sa sinasabi natin digital, nasa internet, may platform. Sabi nila, napakamahal naman ng koneksyon. Pagkatapos, mabagal pa. So ano kaya ang future nitong teknolohiya natin at telecommunication? No? Matulad ba tayo sa ibang bansa na yung internet ay pwedeng gamitin ng libre o murang halaga? I'm sure lahat sila nagtatanong niyan kasi online halos lahat ng marketing ngayon.
Yeah. Well, that's where competition comes in. I always think of my generation when PLDT was the only company. We had party lines, we couldn't use our telephone because it was very inefficient. Then Globe came, some improvement. Then now you have, for example, Converge is challenging these two large companies in many areas like Baguio, like Puerto Princesa, etc., etc. So, and that's only one more participant. And as I said, because of the amendment of the Public Service Act, we may have 10 different companies competing with one another now. Some smaller and others bigger. So that's the way to bring down the cost of connectivity. Competition, competition, competition. You know that very well in business, no? Yeah. So let's make sure that our policymakers continue promoting competition in all the industries that have been monopolized in the past.
O, tsaka ang maganda rin, pag may mga bago din tayo, Doc Bernie, na mga pumapasok na mga players, medyo magkakaroon tayo ng konting pasensya dun sa kanilang learning curve kasi nag-uumpisa. Pero kung hindi natin sila papapasukin, laging mananatili na monopoly ang ating mga telecommunications.
Correct.
And therefore, wala tayong choice. Ang sabi nga natin, pag nag-umpisa ka mag-introduce ng produkto, sana pagbigyan ka ng pagkakataon ng merkado, subukan to, at bigyan ka ng feedback kung paano mo pa-improve. Ganon din sa telecom. So, pag may mga bago tayong players, supportahan din natin para magkaroon tayo ng choices. Lalo na kung mura.
Correct, yeah. And the example of Converge is very encouraging. Converge is a newcomer, but it's amazing how they can give better service in other areas that PLDT and Globe do not want to cover because they don't make too much money. So, and I'm sure there will be other people like this Dennis Uy from Pampanga who will join the industry.
Yeah, that's true. And I have to admit na hindi kami nag-advertise pero ako isa sa mga early movers to Converge. Kasi pareho ninyo naiinis din ako sa internet kasi syempre kailangan mo 'yon for your work so
Exactly.
i-try natin yung mga bago at sana marami nga talagang pumasok na bago. Now on the issue of competitiveness, Doc Bernie, isa sa mga question nila, ang mga higanteng importer ng consumer goods ay pumasok na sa online platforms. And of course, napakalaki ng resources nila kaya nakakapagbaba sila ng mga presyo ng goods. Kalahati lang daw sa mga ordinaryong producer. Kung nagiging kasangkapan ng online platforms para lalong gupitin ang mga small producers, paano ba natin nasasabi na equalizer ang internet? Samantalang magtutuusin, mas malaki ang reach nila. So maganda to dahil na-address na rin naman natin tungkol dun sa opportunity sa local market. But paano nga ba? Maraming tanong ang ating mga MSMEs tungkol dyan, Dr. Bernie.
Well, depends on how clever you are in identifying regions and segments
Correct.
that are still unserved. So that's where the small people will have to be a little faster in identifying. For example, Puerto Princesa, Palawan is my favorite island. Do you know that there's 2,000 islands in Palawan? And there are many areas there that are now just beginning to be electrified because of solar energy. So there's a company from Singapore called We Serve, something like that, that is identifying islands that they can actually provide electricity to solar. And the moment that island has electricity, it has interconnectivity, and the large companies are not going to bother. And so it's a matter for you to follow the route of some of these very resourceful companies that are identifying unserved segments. So you should not fight the big ones in Metro Manila for obvious reasons, and in Metro Cebu. They will always beat you. But some of them may not find it worth their while in going to other regions in which you may have an advantage as a small player. No? So for those of you who have some connections with the whole set of islands in Palawan, you know Palawan, as Alma knows very well, is the only island besides Luzon that will have 3 international airports to which tourists can fly directly: Coron, Puerto Princesa, and San Vicente. And all these are definitely attracting a lot of investors. So it's a matter of your...
Yes, tama. Ang sinasabi sa atin ni Doc Bernie is huwag nating limitahan ang merkado natin. After all, hindi na ngayon problema ang physical distancing because of the internet. So mag-focus tayo dun sa mga area na hindi naman pinapansin ng malalaking importer na to kasi sa tingin nila masyadong maliit para sa kanila yung merkadong yun. Pero yung capabilities natin as MSMEs naaayon dun sa pangangailangan ng mga maliliit na segments na yun. At parati ba siyang maliit? Hindi. Kasi kung marami tayong nakikreate na communities ng maliliit na gano'n, lalaki din ang market natin. Hindi po ba, Doc Bernie?
That's right.
So, I acknowledge ko lang kasi nakita kong nag-message dito. Nandito pala present sa ating forum ang Deputy Director ng PTTC, si Fe. Andito siya. Hello. Good morning. Pangalawa, may isang question dito from Sigi Felongco. Also faced with the current shortage situation of various commodities, how can our MSMEs partners in Escaparate help out in your perspective as an economist?
Well, I think Escaparate can be a tremendous tool to solving an age-old problem in this country, that it is very difficult to get people to form cooperatives. If you can use Escaparate as a means of getting people of like minds and like interests to start cooperatives, and you reach economies of scale, that is the way a Escaparate tool can help you fight the giants. Because if you're united, if you're a cooperative, you can reach an economic scale that may approximate at least some of the medium-sized, and even big companies. So I'm sure that's very much in the mind of Joey, how to use Escaparate as a means of getting people to form cooperatives.
Oh, I remember that. Magandang na-mention mo yan, Doc Bernie, kasi I remember that a few years back, I was asked to speak in a conference of mga pharmaceutical, not drugs, drugstores. Yung mga liliit na mga drugstores. Kasi ang concern
Correct.
nila is that they do not have a lot of muscle in purchasing,
Yes.
and that they cannot
Yeah.
compete with the giants like Mercury
Correct.
Drug, Watsons. Ang sinabi ko
Correct.
sa kanila, pero ang members ninyo all over the Philippines is like nasa mga 15,000 kayo, sabi ko. Can you just imagine, sabi ko, na wala namang 15,000 branches ang Watsons at saka Mercury. Pero kung magiging isang grupo lang kayo, na may sarili kayong branding, you have 15,000 branches all over the country. So how does that make you small? In fact, mas magiging malaki ang network nyo. At dapat mas magiging malaki ang power nyo as a group to negotiate with your suppliers about better deals that they extend to the big players. So ito siguro ang pwede rin gawin ng Escaparate, no? To use the might of combined voices and forces of the MSMEs here and get a better deal from the big companies to supply raw materials at lower cost, because you have, sabi nga ni Doc Bernie, the economies of scale. Tama ba yung aking intindi? Pasensya na kasi hindi
Yes.
yata ako economist.
No, that's right. That's
Ako.
right. Yeah. Precisely. Digitalization now helps us
Yes.
to overcome a very problematic thing of getting people together. And I'm sure the nanays are a lot more enlightened than people in agriculture, farmers, to get them together in cooperative. It's like pulling teeth, But I'm sure the nanays have enough education to know what are the advantages of getting together, Even just in purchasing. Obviously, you will not get together in marketing. You have your own approaches to marketing, but in purchasing raw materials.
Yes. May tinatawag kami nun din sa mga ospital, Dr. Bernie. We call it bulk purchasing. Ibig sabihin,
Correct,
sama-sama lahat ng mga ospital para may power sila to market for better. So siguro, ang maganda dito sa question and answer natin ngayon is marami din tayong nasasabi ng mga suggestions or ideas. Alam niyo, ang maganda kasi, huwag nating masyadong gawing komplikado ang mga solusyon natin. Minsan simple lang naman, katulad ng pagsasama-sama. Simple lang yon. So, hindi naman siya complicated na processes. So I think we'd start with the mindset of working to uplift one another rather than mag-compete parati na mag-compete.
Yeah.
So ang sabi nitong we have a question from Edith Padul. The crisis opens opportunities to be more creative in terms of designs and processes, which is, I think, our discussions right now. But what agencies can help coach or mentor our micro entrepreneurs in this area? So isa sa siguro, merong mga ang DTI, katulad nung nabanggit ni Joey kanina, ang PTTC has already offered their hands in partnership with the Escaparate to improve. In fact, they will soon deploy a suite of programs that will trace the travel or the pathway of enterprises from survival mode to expansion, to growth. So yung pathways na susundan nila will offer not only general business processes, but they will also bring in special interest areas na gustong malaman ng ating mga MSMEs sa pag-improve ng kanilang negosyo. We have very big things coming from that group, as well as the other agencies. I am aware. Meron ding di ba, KMME, meron ding Mentor Me, Go Negosyo, di ba?
Yeah, Go Negosyo, the Joe Concepcion.
Joey Concepcion, yes. I think Joey
Yeah.
and I are speakers of Mentor Me from time to time para sa
Good.
mga entrepreneurs doon. Tapos
Yes.
meron ding mga foundations na tumutulong para sa para sa mga ikagaganda ng mga para makapag-coach and mentor sa mga micro entrepreneurs in this area. So we can also ask the help of big business to to send in people or experts para magturo. Ang problema lang natin minsan is masyadong medyo, di ba, Dr. Bernie, masyadong complicated minsan yung mga ideas nila. sa madalang
Yeah,
gusto
well,
lang naman marinig ng mga tao natin,
yeah,
papaano?
yeah,
Ang
yeah,
hirap.
yeah. Well, I'm glad this is not to flatter Joey. Joey is down to earth. So
Yes, yes.
when it takes a look at business, it's really from the standpoint of the nanais rather than from above, from the standpoint of bankers, of corporate giants, no?
So nakakatuwa naman, dumadami na, siguro natutuwa sila sa huntahan natin, Doktor. Kaya tingnan mo, may question from
Yes.
Melanie Valdeviso. One of the challenging expense for micro-entrepreneurs is our reliance on electricity and water. Will there be a program in the reduction of water and electricity rates? Even resorting to solar power alternatives is expensive.
Yeah. Well, that's always an ongoing program of the government. But I'm not that optimistic that they will solve the problem of price, because at the moment, solar is not really bringing down the price. It will take time before solar brings down the price. No? So we just, as I said, have to be very, very economical in our use of capital, of energy, and as much as possible, really replace energy with manpower. So I know it's easier said than done, but I'm sure those of you who are non-nice have done a lot of, even miracles in whether cooking and things like that do not require too much electricity.
From Edith Fadul again, are there LGUs? Sorry, there's a comment from Millie Arcilia here, but I do not see the question. Are you raising your hands? I do not see in my control raised hands. So I think the technical people of Escaparate will be able to handle this, but I'm sorry, I do not see your raised hand. Are we allowing what do you call this, verbal commentaries or questions online? I will just read first the question of Edith. If you want, Willie, you can write your question, because I don't see anything in my control that allows me to call for somebody who's raising. Well, it doesn't appear in my dashboard. So it says here, guerrilla warfare or niche selling or direct selling in one's network. That is how the small has a fighting chance against the big brands. Are there LGUs or groups that can coach or mentor our enterprises with Escaparate on this approach?
Yes, well, I think there are mentors that are listed with Joey Concepcion's group that you can identify. I know that some of them are in that field. No? So for those of you who are looking for the right mentors, I'm sure you can contact the Mentor Me program of Joey Concepcion. I'm sure Alma from time to time will volunteer also to do her own mentoring. No? Yes. Yeah.
So there's
I'd like to add another area related to the Kabay Academy. One growth sector is non-formal and informal education. Formal education will be in trouble. A lot of universities will close down. People will not have the income to start getting degrees. People will be less degree conscious. What they want will be to acquire skills in a quick period so that they can get employed. There are a lot of people who have to be upskilled, reskilled, retooled. And that's where some of you who are teachers and human resource experts should look at those types of skills that the market needs and are not being supplied in enough quantities, and put up human resource training programs as a business. So that's also an area where I see a tremendous growth. Non-formal, informal skills training, very much along the line of TESDA, but it doesn't have to be long courses. They can be just short courses.
Yeah.
For example, the perfect example is people can be given skills, culinary skills, cooking skills, without having to take a degree. I know of a school called Pulaan in San Juan that in several weeks can give women who want to learn how to bake, etc., can learn, and then they can start their businesses once they have those skills. So skills training is a tremendous opportunity for some of you. And
Yeah. There's another question here, Dr. Bernie. I hope meron din pong agency or company na pwedeng i-link sa Eskaparate Nanay for those who want to upgrade their businesses from manual to automation para sa mas mabilis na production at mapaliit ang cost ng product. Siguro naman merong mga ganyang din. Meron ding mga ganyang mga agencies that can help out. DOST, for example, has programs to help entrepreneurs sa kanilang technology, right?
yes. Well, I would focus on TESDA. TESDA is going to get more and more budget from the government because the government realized that we have been so obsessed with getting college degrees that it has not really helped the economy. We have so many unemployed college graduates, but the economy is crying for more plumbers, electricians, carpenters. You know, the Build program sometimes cannot get going because we don't have enough of these. And so we need really, first of all, institutions that will focus on giving the skills and a change of mindset of parents and students that a college degree is no longer the best way to be employed.
No, that's also true. Doon tungkol naman daw sa financing and assistance, this is again one of the questions we received in advance. Yung sobrang higpit daw ng mga bangko. Samantalang panay daw ang kanilang panay daw nilang nababasa sa dyaryo yung mga record profits sa panahong ito. Ang sabi nga dito, parang nanunuya sa mga negosyanteng dapang-dapa na ngayon. May malaking pagbabago po ba na dapat mangyari sa mga bangko? Question.
Well, I think that's where also competition comes in. I think more and more the banks have to compete with one another, and they see that if they do not treat their borrowers properly, they will go to another bank, no? So, and well, I don't want to advertise specific banks. One bank I see very helpful in digitalization is Union Bank, probably the most digitalized of all the banks, no? And I'm sure some of you have experience. So again, here, like in telecom, they will not improve their efficiency if there are too few of them. And I think there's enough competition among banks, and they're really now bending backwards to be able to service micro entrepreneurs. So it's a matter of you identifying which these banks are. No?
Yeah. Well, these are some comments, siguro, both comment and question that we also got. Bakit hindi po lubayan ng BIR at mga LGU ang mga maliliit na negosyante? Mas malaki po yung pakinabang if they run after yung mga malalaking kumpanya kesa kaming maliliit na hindi maka-afford ng accountant. Yan ang kanilang question, Dr. Bernie.
I agree, and I think there's some provisions in which people with limited revenue are not really taxed, no?
Oo, tama.
At least, yeah. So probably that can be applied also to small businesses. Unless you reach a certain revenue, I mean, you don't have to pay as much taxes. I think that's already an existing policy of the BIR.
Yeah. Parang dito sa train to yata lumabas yung ganyan for the small enterprises. So
Correct.
Siguro dapat mag-schedule din ng what you call this, parang orientation para sa mga provisions ng tax law na pwedeng mag-apply para sa ating mga micro-entrepreneurs. May question din sila on operations. Doc Bernie, kailan po ba matatapos itong krisis natin sa langis at walang tigil na pagtaas ng halaga ng mga raw materials? Sa tuwing mababayaran kami ng customers sa ibinenta namin, mas kaunti na ang nabibili naming raw materials. Pakonti ng pakonti ang nagagawa namin produkto sa bawat cycle.
That's not within our control because it depends on Putin and the Arabs. Now that the prices of oil are coming down, some of them are now threatening to limit supply so that they can bring them up again. So we just have to roll with the punches, though. There are certain things in business that are beyond our control, even beyond the control of our government. No, and as I said, our turning to renewables in the long run will be very good, especially for the climate. But in the short run, I'm afraid, prices of energy will continue to be high.
So, the other question, hindi po ba pwedeng magkaroon ng batas ng mga malalaking kumpanya ay hindi pwedeng basta-basta mag-cancel ng purchase order at hindi pwedeng magtagal sa pagbabayad sa maliliit na negosyante? Bakit kami pa pong mga maliit na negosyante ang kailangan mag-finance sa mga malalaking kumpanya? Naku, totoo din yan. Itong mga bagay na
fully
to
agree with you.
naman,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Sana
fully
ito
agree.
pwedeng gawan, kaya lang ewan ko kung paano natin ito matutulungan.
Yeah. No, it now it rests on the conscience of the big businesses, though, because it's very difficult really to monitor all of this, length of terms of payment and so on and so forth. But I must say there are big businesses that have, as part of their corporate social responsibility, to deal with their small suppliers in a more ethical way. So, but I think it's going to be difficult to implement that in terms of a law.
Oo nga. So, at saka siguro medyo mas matagal na proseso pero pwede din naman tayong mag-lobby sa Congress para sa mga ganitong klaseng sa mga ganitong mga klaseng adhikain. Kasi minsan pagka hindi mo makuha sa pakiusapan, pwede naman sigurong i-regulate na lang, di ba, Doc Bernie? It will take some time, but if you don't start it now, wala ring mauumpisan. So at least man lang mailagay natin sa level of awareness ng ating mga legislators. Tungkol naman sa trends and technology, itong susunod na advanced question, Dr. Bernie, may kabuluhan po ba sa maliliit na negosyante ang cryptocurrency? Darating po ba ang araw na magiging malawak ang paggamit nito?
My attitude is stay away from cryptocurrency now and for some time to come. It's still very much in a flux. And
experimental
in my experience,
stage.
more people have lost their shirt in cryptocurrency than got something. If you get something, it's very short term. Sooner or later, people who are in cryptocurrency regret having been there. So stay away from it, especially small entrepreneurs. That's too sophisticated for you already.
Okay, so once again, I call on Willie Arcilia to just write down siguro the question here because as I said, I don't have in my dashboard anything about raised hands. But let me just acknowledge some of the comments we're getting, like from Honorable Rodolfo G. Valencia. Sir, nandito po pala kayo joining us today and thank you very much for your kind words. And sabi niya, constituents from Mindoro will join and support. So thank you, Governor Rod Valencia. Also from Ms. Grace Padaka. Oo nga. Sabi niya is, ang gaganda po ng tanong ng mga nanay. Oo nga, nakuha namin to lahat to sa kanilang mga advanced questions. We also learn and realize things from their questions. Yun. So, meron pa ba tayong hindi nasasagot dito? Mukhang na-cover naman natin lahat, Dr. Bernie. So, except for that one question from Willie Arcilia, but I still have to see it in my chat box. But if it's not here, I cannot read it. So, ano pa ba? Mukhang wala na naman. Some of the questions here. How is Escaparate addressing the financing needs of the nanays besides sponsorships? Maybe Joey can chime in. Is a question ito. Is this Nini Alvero? So anyway, this is sabi niya, how is Escaparate addressing the financing needs of the nanays besides sponsorship?
Yeah, most of the nanays were onboarded by microfinance institutions that are in the lending business themselves. So whenever there are financing requirements, we try to refer them back to the MFIs of which they are part. But those who are independent, those who onboarded themselves without the help of any organization, we're trying to craft a program for them.
All right, so I don't think I missed anything here. Wala na tayong tanong. Napakaganda ng mga diskusyon natin, Dr. Bernier. Really thank you for
Yes.
for that, for those insights. I also learned a lot. And thank you, Joey, for getting me here kahit na medyo minsan madaldal daw ako, pero gusto ko lang na sa pag-uusap kasi namin ni Dr. Bernie, ma-stimulate ang inyong mga isip at baka magkaroon din kayo ng mga bagay na, uy, o nga pala, may gusto din akong itanong. So I think we got a lot of good questions this morning, and we answered a lot of questions also this morning. So I will just wind up my what do you call this? Wind up ko lang yung ating what do you call this? Yung ating session this morning para ma-turn over ko na. So I will just let me see. I will just share my screen so that I will finish the presentation. Can be seen now, no?
Yes, Miss Alma.
So, alam niyo, recently, naglabas ang ADB SME Monitor ng April 2022. And they said, sa Philippines daw, the top 3 on the wish list ng mga MSMEs in both 20 and 2021 is zero interest or collateral-free loans. 89% will be about faster loan approvals, and about 89% also for refinanced or low interest loans. Pero 1 year into the pandemic, access to working capital is what is the serious concern for MSMEs. And totoong mahirap pumanap ng kapital, lalo na kung hindi magbabago yung sistema ng ating financing institutions sa pagtingin kung sino at ano ang karapat-dapat na bigyan ng pagkakataon. Pero meron din namang advantage ang pagiging entrepreneur sa ating bansa dahil napakalaki pa din ng, sabi nga ni Dr. Bernie, advantage ng higit 100 milyon na populasyon natin. Marami sa kanila ay hindi pa rin natutugunan ng pangangailangan. Kung tayo ay maghihintay ng galaw ng gobyerno, matagal at mabagal. At yung oras na yan, wala naman tayo dahil kailangan natin kumita. So isang napakahusay na platform ng Eskaparate dahil habang lumalaki yung mga narirитong mga nanay at tatay, lumalakas din ang puwersa at boses. Pag mag-isa ka lang, mahirap pakikang marinig. Pero pag marami kayo, marami tayo at sama-samang humahakbang, magkaisa at magkatulungan, bawat isa sa atin pwedeng umangat. Mas madali tayong maririnig. Sana ipagpatuloy natin yung pagsasama-samang ito dahil ito ay napaka-epektibong paraan para maging mas matatag ang ating negosyo. At minsan sinasabi din natin na ang business dapat ang malalaking korporasyon magbigay ng business. Pero sa tingin ko, even within this Eskaparate community, we can create the business by being a supplier to one another. So that means we also expand our market even within the community. Magtulungan tayo. So let us continue supporting one another and strengthen the platform because only then will your voices be heard. So I think that's it, Joey. Maraming salamat this morning and thank you for the opportunity to join you all.
Thank you, Alma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Siguro we can ask for final word from Dr. Bernie also.
Well, my final word is we are thinking short term now. How to survive yung very high interest rates, inflation, depreciation of the peso. But I would encourage all of us to think long term. The Philippines is now going to graduate to what is called an upper middle income economy in the next 2 to 3 years. And beyond that, if all of us cooperate and persevere in whatever we're doing, in 20 years, I know some of you will say we may not be around in 20 years, but I'm sure you will be happy for your children or your grandchildren, depending on your age, that in 20 years, there's a very high probability that the Philippine economy will become first world. I'm sure some of you have read the NEDA document called Ambition 2040. and other groups have been talking about the decade of 2040 to 2050. You know, when some people tell me, Dr. Villegas, don't tell us about 2040, 2050. We will not be there to see it. You know what I tell them? Speak for yourselves. My mother lived up to 102. I may still be around in 2040. But regardless of who will be among us still alive, at least for those of you with children and grandchildren, you will be glad to know that in one generation, in 20 years, we will be at a level at which, for example, South Korea is right now, a first world country. And so that's why our efforts today are not going to be in vain. Because if we persevere in addressing all the challenges, our example will not be lost to those who will come after us. And so not into too distant future, we can hold our heads high and say, we have overcome poverty, and we can now be among the ranks of countries in the world that are considered to be high income. So that's my parting words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bernie Villegas and Yusek Alma Jimenez. Napaka-interesting po ang naging discussion natin with them. Tuwang-tuwa po ang mga guests and micro-entrepreneurs at nasugutan ng marami ang kanilang mga tanong.